that perhaps for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done. Now, that is not to say that the truth doesn't exist, nor is it to say that the truth isn't important. Clearly, the search for the truth has led us to do great things, to learn great things. But I think if I were to really ask you to think about this, one of the things that we could all acknowledge is that part of the reason we have such glorious chronicles to the human experience in all forms of culture is because we acknowledge there are many different truths. And so, in the spirit of that, I'm certain that the truth exists for you, and probably for the person.
How about that? Can I hear me now? Yeah, there I am. See, I'm learning, folks. I'm learning. I'm figuring it out. Well, welcome to the Gutencast. My name is Anthony Horvath, and today we're going to be talking about lots of things. Power is going to be top of the list, but how we actually get to talking about power is going to be somewhat of a circuitous route. So I'm going to say just a few words before I bring in my guest, Glenn Jones, who is watching this as we speak. And we're going to go back in time 126 years, do some quick math, and start with the Spanish-American War, just to give us some historical background on this. So I had to brush up a little bit on the Spanish-American War. I learned about it once, and then I just watched some videos, read some articles. I'm like, man, I really don't know anything. Like, I think I used to know that, like a constant discovery of stuff. And it's just, what was fascinating about it is that the discovery, which I never really processed before, was that the American public at the time was just hostile to Spain. Like, they really hated Spain because there had been these movements to get Spain out of Cuba by Cubans for a long time at that point, and the American citizenry had taken a side, and it was very much anti-Spain. But the crazy thing is that when it actually came down to the question of conflict, there seems to be really only two main catalysts. One you can see on the screen here. It's the explosion of the Maine. I'm sure everyone knows about that. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the other one was there was a was it McKinley? Suddenly I'm forgetting who the president was. I think it was McKinley. The Spanish ambassador wrote a letter, like making fun of him, accusing him of being all weak and soft and stuff like that. And one of the newspapers, because they wanted a war, published it. And now he was like boxed into a corner. He was humiliated, and his hand was also forced about, they called me weak, so now I'm going to have to react with, some sort of assertiveness. And the president was on record as saying he didn't care about, like, the Philippines, for example. Like, it was not relevant to him. He had some concern about Cuba. So he sent the Maine down there, and everyone knows what happened from there. The Maine blew up, and before the ink was dry, I don't know if we can use that phrase in this context, like immediately before any real evidence or information had surfaced, the Hearst and the Pulitzer newspapers had basically they just blanketed the entire country, especially in New York, since that's where they were based out of. with it's time to go to war with Spain. Spain attacked us. They blew up our ship. Like 168 people were killed, and before you know it, the passions had been so inflamed that there was nothing that they could do but to go to war. Um, and it's interesting that war was basically declared not by Congress or the president, not really. It was declared by this hyper-inflamed public, and then Congress and the president just had to go along with it because, gee whiz, what are they going to do with all this pent-up hatred that they're just seeing unleashed on everything? Of course, there was the problem was immediately there was a question of, well, did Spain actually blow up the ship? Which seems like an important point, something of potential relevance. Anyway, I found this quote. I have it up here. Let me make it a little bit bigger so you can look at it. There you are. That's not making it bigger. That's just moving it. So in response to the accusations that they had exaggerated, not just the main thing, but what the Spanish were doing to the Cubans, the response was, you see it, it would be difficult to exaggerate conditions in Cuba. We merely took a little dramatic license. Our editors were only serving the interests of the public. Americans hate Spain, so we gave them something to stew about. Well, I don't know about you, but I hate it. I detest it when somebody else out there decides for me what I'm going to be angry about. I mean, that makes me angry. Like even just now, you don't know this. I had to censor myself because I was ready to F-bomb the people who do that. I really hate them. Now I bring up this. We're starting with this because this was sort of the beginning of the ability of a few people to control the thoughts and minds and actions of the masses. Before this, sure, there were newspapers, of course, but the kind of circulation that Pulitzer and Hearst had was in the hundreds of thousands with potential of reaching millions very quickly. This was before the days of the radio. Obviously, no television, no movies. I guess you could say there was books, but of course that was a different kind of labor-intensive kind of thing. These were daily things that if you wanted to get a viewpoint out and you wanted to hammer home your thought, the thing that you wanted, and you were Hearst or Pulitzer, you could do it. You could move people almost immediately. And we see that in this case it resulted in war. And I think that if we go back and we look at history, we're not going to have trouble finding other examples where this media push led to wars. There was the Tonkin Bay issue in Vietnam, which many people think was fanned into existence by the federal government, but then the media played into it. And then, of course, in more recent times, in our own lifetimes, right, there's many people would put the Iraq War in this, right? So this is the kind of thing that we should be thinking about. And what I want to do is really ram home the fact and the truth that people they've actually figured out that they can use the media in this way, and they can use the things that we consume as entertainment basically as a weapon. Now, if you watched my podcast last week, I talked about Jacques Ellul in his book Propaganda, and one of the reasons why I did it is just to put people on notice that they know, they know how to get us to be active, and we're basically like sheep. We're like Plato's sheep for them to massage and direct. And by doing it that way, they absolve themselves from a lot of the responsibility because they're not the ones that actually take the action, right? They might instigate it, they might goad it, but from the outside view, the responsibility for the actual action, let's say with Iraq or whatnot, it was the public. The public wants it, and the fact that they happen to manipulate the public is a small thing. So I want people to know that this is happening in a very sophisticated way, and it's absolutely intentional, and to stop falling for it. Please, I beg you, stop falling for it. So we're gonna transition here for a minute, but I just want to give a little clue as to the kind of the trajectory. As you know, we sell books. Now, I happen to notice that I haven't sold a lot more books since starting this podcast. So I would kindly ask you to go to the Guten Book Press website and see if you can find a book that we publish and buy some copies. That'd be great. These are copies that we publish and are on the website as well. If you look in the description of the YouTube video, I have a link that takes you to all three of them. So this is a 1915 era book. Wilfred Trotter, he was a sociologist. I don't know if he was an actual sociologist, but he studied the sociology of managing the mass mind. And you have to remember that this was all very new. The ability to reach so many people all at once and to deal with people not as people but as a mob, essentially, that you can guide was all very new. So he started studying it in around 1915. He's one of the earliest that I'm aware of, at least. I'm sure there's others, but Walter Lippmann, a very well-known newspaper guy. This was 1922, I believe. And basically, he's also saying, we need to spread our liberal values through the newspaper in a very proactive, intentional way. The title of the book, Public Opinion, sort of gives it away. But one of the most explicit practitioners of this was a guy named Edward Bernays. We hope he's in heaven. If we see him in heaven, we're all going to line up and kick him in the ass for what he did and then joke about it later. Glad you're here, buddy. Edward Bernays, one of the first public relations guys, and for whatever amount of money that you offered him, he would go out and he'd manufacture for the client whatever it is that they wanted. I don't want to get too deep into it, but he has a book called Engineering Consent, or is it Manufacturing Consent? I have both. So, anyway, Engineering Consent, I believe, is what his was. And basically, he makes the case that what he's doing, this massaging of public opinion, it's not so bad. It's necessary for democracy, because this is how a democracy gets things done, is people come to consensus. And who is going to be the one who brings everyone to consensus? Why, it's Edward Bernays, right? So don't you just want to know how many views that you have right now are not the result of your own personal investigation, but actually the result of sophisticated, unelected elites who believe they know better than you and implanted in you certain ideas and thoughts and mannerisms. Maybe you don't care. For me, though, I find that a detestable operation. But that's all I'm going to say about No, that's not all I'm going to say about that. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to bring in my guest, and I see what I've worked myself up to a lather here, and I need to hand it off here. So please welcome back to the show, friend of the program, Glenn Jones. Glenn, thanks for being here tonight.
Yes, glad to be here. That was a lively introduction.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
to
out.
the topic. To
Yeah.
the topic, not me. To the
Oh,
topic.
yeah. So before we go off into the the article that sort of inspired tonight's session, how would you react to that introduction?
Well, it sounds like a lot of everything I grew up with.
Oh, in
And
what sense? What do you mean by that?
everything that I saw in terms of well, a great example in my personal history that I remember was the instigation or further justification for what we did. Am I allowed to say this, in the Iraq War?
Sure. Well, I
And you remember
started
you remember the WMDs, right?
Yep.
The the so-called credible source that was
Well, which one?
reported on, right? Yeah. I won't get into who it was, but yeah, the supposed credible sources came from Britain. It's
right.
I thought it came through Britain from the MI6 or whatever, right? But yeah, and just the fact that so much was used by that supposed source reporting to justify the public's interest in taking down another national situation,
right? Yeah,
that had supposedly caused us trouble.
Yeah, so I don't know. I probably am the only person that that even to this day believes the incursion into Iraq was justified based on the information available at the time. Do you know anybody else?
Well, no, I agree with that. I agree with that.
All right.
I'm just saying now.
Yeah, right.
20 years later.
Right.
What we know now.
Right.
So I defended that. I defended that as well. And I agree that what we knew at the time was there. I'm just pointing out there's a similarity.
Yeah.
If in fact some of that reporting was
and just think about
a little yellow.
Right, a little yellow. Think about all the lives that were lost because of this, right? I mean, not American lives, but in Iraq and in Syria, to the echoes of it just keep on going. I mean, we're still coping with that, right? So this is a really good example of why I detest them so much, because they think they're so smart and wise. They're going to get public opinion all going in this direction. And now 20, 25 years later, we still have a huge mess. We have a lot of people in cemeteries buried, and we have a lot of people walking around without limbs of all nationalities, right? And they take no responsibility for that at all. That bothers me. Yeah.
And the other thing was that with your introduction that I loved was the fact that we all need to be wise to this. Right? We all need to be aware of this, because I mean you're looking at 20 plus years ago, right?
Right. Yep.
And then what we're looking at is 20, 30 years ago, the development of a new mass media technology, which is the internet.
Yep.
Culminating in social media.
Yeah.
And just like everybody 120 years ago was taken by it, right?
Yep.
We're facing that whole, what would you call it? That whole influence of a new system that has, I mean, tell me what you think of this, right? So some of my initial conclusions with recent decades is that social media was major player in why Obama won.
Yeah.
And did what he he triumphed so hard and so victoriously through his superior usage of the new media.
Yeah,
And then of course Trump,
right? Yeah,
figured out exactly how to do it when no one else could. You had what are the two guys? Romney was the second effort,
McCain?
and he was terrible. McCain, McCain and Romney, they were just terrible. Completely unlikable people. But anyway,
So
the media made such a play.
I'm glad you brought up the internet and social media in this context, because I wonder if there might be other parallels going back to with the rise of the newspapers in America. Mm-hmm. Every town had one, and that went away. Big newspapers bought up the little ones, and they got consolidated so that you ended up only having a few narratives, and that's really accelerated to today, where giant conglomerates own 200 newspapers, and the little locals are getting tossed, right? But with the internet, it's kind of the same thing. You and I were there at the beginning with online debates, and it was the Wild West, right?
That's right.
They said, "Oh, it's horrible. The Wild West. We can't have the Wild West. Nobody wants the Wild West." And so then even that got centralized, and that's where the social media went. Is it became centralized as well, and that gave them, whoever them is in this context, the ability once again to pull everyone in from all the corners and thrust a narrative on them. And it was Iraq, Obama, Trump actually did it pretty well in 2016, but then of course COVID, right? So we're like direct witnesses of this. And the thing that bothers me is, so like COVID was only 4 years ago, 5 maybe, and people are still falling for it.
Yeah,
that
clip you played was a couple of years old, right?
Yeah, it was.
But did you see in the audience there were still masks?
Yes, I did. But
I'm sorry, I noticed that. Just happened to.
Bless their heart.
Couldn't help it.
So I didn't mention. So the clip was Karen, what's her face or whatever her name is, who's the head of the NPR now, but at the time she was the CEO of Wikipedia, which again is we've gone from having all of the diverse areas of information to now where basically like Google is just the search index for Wikipedia, right? So everything, all the information has been narrowed and stuff. So to have the CEO of Wikipedia actually say, so truth is kind of a problem of doing stuff, right? She's in charge of the encyclopedia that everybody uses, and she's like, well, it's important. We've done amazing things in our quest for truth, but I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but she goes on. Of course, the example is climate change. For all their efforts, they have not been able to get rid of the misinformation for climate change, and that's kind of where she goes with it. And so, like in my mind, to me, if a person says truth is a big problem, it stands in our way of getting things done, then says, so we have to do something about this climate change. I'm thinking that truth is not the truth of climate change probably isn't so good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I don't trust that messenger.
Yeah. No, and that's a relevant item for the article.
Yes.
This evening.
Yes. So that sounds like a good time to segue.
I don't know.
Here comes the segue. Check this scene out. Scene switch.
There we go. Yes. I love the shift in the camera.
So Glenn sent me this a while back now, and I read it at the time, and I was just waiting for the opportunity to where it fit. And coming after last week's bit about propaganda,
Mhm.
made it tie in. Now this is a really, I think I put the link to this in the description, so you should already be able to go and get it and read along it if you want. It ends with how the mass media is involved in shaping public opinion and public action, but it's in the context of it's an application of power by people who don't want to know. They don't want people to know that they're in power. They want to
That's right.
do their thing and have nobody know that they did their thing. So take it from there.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great aspect. This is just for some brief context. Mencius Molebug. However, he came up with that name. I think Mencius was a Chinese philosopher, and then the mold bug. I don't know what a mold bug is. So.
Yeah.
But this is a pseudonym for Curtis Yarvin, just for context there. From his old blog. I think the blog went from 2007 to 2016, and this is one of his early writings. So in that article, he says that the people who don't want you to know they have power have developed a euphemism, right? And that euphemism is responsibility.
Right. That's right.
So you have responsible journalism, right?
Correct.
So
Yep.
that leads you to reporting on global warming,
Right.
right? Just
right.
to quickly tie into that,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it's that the other aspect I'll say is that the people who don't want you to know that power exists have what one of the problems was the categorization of power in English is generally predisposed as evil, right?
Yeah.
So at least in our day, and to some extent historically, you could make the claim that maybe that's for good reason. Lord Acton, I think the famous quote is "Absolute power corrupts absolutely," and those kind of norms have developed with the American system of governance, right? Because it's the equal branches, right? The co-equal branches, so that power wouldn't be concentrated in a totalitarian or a centralized form, which I'll just go ahead and say it didn't really work out. It didn't really stop. It didn't really stop that from eventually developing.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, that aspect of what journalism has to say nowadays is that they have this caveat and this power system that they don't want you to know they have.
Yeah.
Right. And it's predicated upon what you introduced, I think, the democracy and the populace supposedly being concerned about these things, right? But they're concerned about those things because these mass media outlets are only writing about those things.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the mass media outlets choose to write about these things, and global warming would not be a thing if they didn't do that.
Right.
That's the point, right? So what is it about? Just tie this together with journalism and mass media and power. What are any of those, let's say it this way, journalism, mass media, and power, are any of those inherently evil?
So I think we'd
Go ahead.
I think was that a rhetorical question, or did you want me to answer?
Well, I want you to comment on it. That's fine. I just wanted to draw that out because I will go ahead and say this. Yeah. I don't think you can say power is inherently evil. right?
Yeah, right.
God's omnipotent. He's all powerful.
Yeah.
And he's the best, the most good, right? He is good.
Yeah. So I think what we're discovering is that the power that is exercised by the media, it is another one of those things that requires a check and a balance. So none of these things that you described and none of the other things that we might want to describe are going to be inherently or intrinsically evil. But in the hands of a fallen people, they're inevitably inclined to abuse. And the only way that we have found as a species to this point to prevent that from turning into absolute bloodshed is to have checks and balances. I'm gesturing with my hands. You can't see my hands. To have checks and balances so you can only get so far, and then there's a wall that stops you. So the problem with the media in this context is that what we would say that the solution to bad speech is good speech or other speech, right? That's how you solve the misinformation crisis. Is not shutting down other voices, but just to raise voices, right? But when you have all this centralization and consolidation, that the ability of that to serve as a check and balance goes away. And so now we have this paradoxical problem where we don't want to ban speech. That would be absolutely ridiculous. I hope no one thinks that I would advocate for that in any respect whatsoever. But it's being used against us. It's being weaponized against us, and so some kind of response has to be erected at some level, perhaps by saying, like from the governmental standpoint, look, you can only buy 10 newspapers, like you can only own 5 television stations or something like that, just because it's like it's the abuse of the monopoly power, basically, but in this case it's information instead of commerce.
Yeah. So that's one of the more controversial aspects of Yarvin's proposal, where you would clearly diverge, right? Is that he is angling towards a shift away from democracy to monarchy.
Oh, see, that's not in this article.
No, I'm just telling you that's not in this article.
Okay.
So you can see the insight he has here, but his solutions might be a lot more difficult. But he was invited to the inauguration stuff and is very favorable towards J.D. Vance and I believe he thinks that Vance would be a perfect candidate for a good ruler. So basically here's the kicker, right? That we talk about the limiting of power through the equal branches of government, but due to all of this mass media and control, right? What you're proposing is we have to modify something, right?
Yeah.
So that's the unknown, right? We don't know exactly what we have to modify, but we have to modify something because the non-established or the non-formal, what he calls in this article the iron polygon, the non-formal structures are what actually hold the most power, right? They've gotten into this coordinated control format by a small, a centralized small number of elites, you might say, right? So those people who own the papers, the people who own or control the universities, the people who control several different ones. What was it? Do you remember what he listed as the some of the main players in it?
Sorry, I got distracted by a comment.
Oh, you're good. Handle that. I'll find it. Let's see real quick. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to tell me where
He
it
goes
is.
into the key power to the Fourth Republic is not that no one who has power wants anyone to think.
Oh, I've already
I'm
got
sorry.
it.
You got it up there. Yeah, the key
Yeah.
to power in the Fourth Republic is that no one who has power wants someone to think of them as having power. For example, in the traditional Iron Triangle, legislators do not have power. They're just expressing the quote will of the people. Right?
Yeah, right.
Civil servants don't have power. They're just making public policy.
Yeah.
Lobbyists don't have power. They're just communicating concerns.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then at one point he goes on to list several items, and that is the major vertices. That's where it is, down several paragraphs down, talking about the major vertices, and the press. He argues is a major vertice because it holds the two key vertexes of power, right? So in order to be a major vertex in this power or this iron polygon of power, you have to hold responsibility, right? That's the power that he spoke of. And then you also have to be protected from public opinion, which is the claim of democracy. That is insulated from politics. If you have one of these but not the others, you're a minor vertex. So, for instance, the presidency he considers as a minor vertex because its protections are lousy, right? It does not have protection from public opinion. The presidency can be right, and this is all been played out with Trump's first term.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they, in effect, they were able, depending on how you view the outcome of the second election where Biden won. We don't have to get into that, but I do think there was a genuine reality in which, because the presidency does not have the protection from public power, it is a minor vertex in this iron polygon, can be altered and replaced, right? The individuals in that system can be dethroned, so to say, because they can't be protected from public opinion. And so the entirety of Trump's first term was journalism attacking Trump.
Yeah. Right.
In the realm of public opinion.
So
to where his power meant nothing.
Yeah. Well, exactly right. Yeah. So, and it raises, and we're seeing it today too. They're trying at least to try to bind him up so that he can't act on foreign affairs or whatnot, because they still think that if they can change public opinion on him, then he'll stop doing it. But I think they have badly miscalculated their man for Trump 2.0.
Yes, and so this is the other key insight that I mentioned to you before the show. I think the other key insight of what has changed with this Trump 2.0 administration and Trump himself is at the beginning of this article where Mulbug or Yarvin talks about the potential to change the current U.S. regime there in that fourth paragraph.
Right.
Where he says that some Deus Ex Machina could remove one of the opposing power centers or point one in a new direction, and in a new and unopposed direction, and we'd see instant and explosive change. So,
so for
what this tied to? Go ahead. I've got it.
Well, I just contextualize this. When he's talking about in this article about the regime change or whatever, he's talking to almost about like the meta framework of the country changing. He's not talking about all of a sudden King Vance would show up. So like he talks about how the constitutional republic replaced the Articles of Confederation, and that was like a new republic. And then he's going to go on, and the world that FDR created with the New Deal was yet another new meta framework that didn't exist before. So just contextualizing what you're saying is so the viewer understands. Of course, ideally the viewer would go read the article, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
But if they don't do that, just so that they understand that it's just talking about a new meta framework for how we are governed.
And so what I think the insight of what we just said about journalism. So I'm trying to contextualize it before I say it. Right. The idea that journalism and mass media has so influenced people, right? If you can take one of those key players in the system, right, and turn it in a better direction, that you can see change. So in our context for this recent election, there was a major change in mass media. And what I mentioned before the show was the purchase of Twitter, which is now X, by Elon Musk. That took a major player Twitter was completely surviving and paying its employees, and too many of them, right, innumerable amounts of money because it was being funded by the government, right? Like it was being backed up. And of course, Musk had to deal with all that and clean house, and he basically canned everybody and said, well, we're just going to have programmers fix this. And we don't need half the 90% of the employees in the company who are all on board with this. But because he changed that, he was able to change the outcome of the election that is largely controlled by the mass media, and so especially in our day, the social media. And then the second facet of this whole change changing it in a different direction, we hope it's in a good direction, right? Is that with power comes, the whole question of responsibility.
Right.
Now, he was saying it's a euphemism. They don't want you to know they have power, but power exists no matter what. And if you use it responsibly and you just are able to do things, you can actually see major change occur. So with what has happened now, I think, and we don't have to belabor this point, I just would say what has happened now is that you're watching Trump, who is now, let's go ahead and say it. Would you agree that he is largely insulated from criticism from public opinion due to the dismantling of the mainstream media and stuff through corruption? Does that make sense? Like they've lost their viewership. The new social media has transitioned to independent journalism. Right. And hardly anybody's watching the mainstream media. Right. And now X is owned here. And he has actually become insulated from public opinion. Number one, through his own will of being shot at.
Right.
Almost and the fact that the media itself has in some sense lost its ability
so that's
to influence.
So I think that
a lot of thoughts there. Sorry.
As far as with Trump, I think that he's insulated just by being like completely pissed off about how he was treated. And I don't think he has any respect for the mainstream. It doesn't believe that if a mainstream outlet comes out and says blah blah blah, 20 years ago, if there was an editorial in the Washington Post that came out that was troublesome to the White House, they probably woke up everybody in the press corps in the White House, the press team, like, oh my gosh, how are we going to deal with this op-ed in the Washington Post? It's terrible. Oh, it's gonna because at that time, it probably legitimately, the viewpoints of that one WAPO writer probably did reflect a million people, will say, or it was representative. And now there's just, if the WAPO puts out an op-ed, this may be an exaggeration, but there's probably just like 5 people in a room in probably a basement somewhere, their mother's basement, and they're still wearing the masks when they shower. And like Trump is just like, I don't care,
Yeah.
So I think that is a really huge part of it. But I'm not sure yet that the splintering of the voices has yet reached a point that it can be dismissed. But that doesn't mean that Trump is going to be like sensitive to it. Like the nightly news, I know people, they still get all of their views on the world from what they see on the nightly news.
The nightly news.
And whatever. But it's usually an older group, but they do. But I think the days of catering to that has gone away. At least with this administration. A future one might return to it.
Yeah. And this isn't. Well, let me ask it this way to tie back to our original story. If you can help me out, what was the man that you said we'd kick in heaven if we saw him? Yeah, Bernays, there you go.
Yeah,
Bernays, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was paying him to do that? Was he getting paid?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, he got paid by corporations. But for the example that I gave you off the air about how he was hired to promote community water fluoridation, that was financed by the government, probably by the Atomic Energy Agency, because when they were making nuclear fissile materials, they were generating fluoride as a byproduct, and our government couldn't let on to the relationship between the generation of atomic materials. So Bernays covered that up for him.
So he did, but how was he tied to the media? That's what I was trying to remember.
Yeah, so he was like he was one of the first, if not the first, public relations guy. Like that was his job. He worked for like an ad agency, basic kind of a thing. And so if you wanted somebody to come in and shape public opinion so that you got rich, he was the guy that you hired. I didn't. He was instrumental with the Banana Republic, the United Fruit Company. The United Fruit Company basically hired him to go in and undermine Guatemala, I think. And he basically helped overthrow Guatemala, if I remember correctly. And that's where we get the phrase Banana Republic, right? So he doesn't he doesn't talk about a lot of that stuff, obviously, for obvious reasons. But yeah, so that's the answer to your question. Why do you ask?
Yeah, so that's where I wanted to tie in what we've seen recently with the whole defunding of things through USAID.
Oh, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
USAID. So like the NGOs and all those groups, to what extent the media, operatives, right? All of this stuff controlled by this centralized elite that Moldbug's article talks about.
Right.
That is another aspect of what I think we're witnessing in the shift of the regime and the power system, because largely, yeah, like you said, there's still people who watch the mainstream media or the evening news, but those numbers have drastically dwindled. But they were able to maintain. And I guess my point is that just like he was able to control things through his ad agency and his media, those were though you could see cracks, and that's where we're saying I agree with you. You know, we'll still see where it's going and how far it gets.
Yeah,
but they could not. I don't think today, over the last 5 to 10 years, with the shift in independent journalism and the shift in mass media and who controls what, especially now that X's control is been lost by the purchase of it through Musk. You know, Facebook is changing, right? You saw Zuckerberg say that maybe we were wrong, about censorship.
He saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, he saw the writing on the wall.
Yep.
And what it ends up is we find out, I think, that over this last decade, these major companies that were influential players couldn't have survived without their funding.
That's correct. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So now that has happened and political power has now been used for good to defund all these illegitimate activities that were going on, then, you know, we might see substantial change. So it remains to be seen. So I just thought that he was a good historical connector because he was influencing all of these governmental positions by his ads, right? And his publication of information. And that continued all the way up to this day.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In many ways, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of any of this, so let's go back to your original desire, education.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of all this,
right? Yeah,
you're going to be thrown for a loop by
you're basically just a shell at that point. You're just a puppet, and if you want
NPC, they call it.
Yeah, and if you're okay with that, then by all means, just continue on. But here's one of the things that Jacques Ellul brought out, and I talked about this at some length last time, is that he observed that the people who were most vulnerable to the outrage industry was actually the highly educated people, because the highly educated, the highly literate people believed that they were well informed, and because they had this belief in themselves and their own constant righteousness, that they could not be stopped. It's like C.S. Lewis's quote about, the robber baron, at least he sometimes sleeps. The people that he was worried about, they're always up and they always think they're morally righteous, so they never stay their hand. And so, but those are also, according to Ellul, exactly the easiest people to manipulate. You put an article in the New York Times and they're like, oh, well, the New York Times says, so it must be a credible viewpoint. And if I only write about it on a one of these independent sites, that's probably misinformation. Oh, that's dirty. I don't want to be dirty. And it's almost like this, like this snobbish kind of thing that leads them to side with the ones that they think are reputable, right? It has nothing to do with truth.
Yeah.
It's just, will people think that I'm a respectable person if I have this viewpoint? Is the viewpoint true? Doesn't matter. They're not even going to think about it. Yeah. So if you want to be that guy, if you want to be that person, then by all means. But you can't hold it against the rest of us who are like, no, that's well, I believe that's that's a new form of slavery, I would say.
Yeah. The on your end, I was just going to say there was a little bit of a breakup on your audio, so I'm not sure. I'll let you know if it gets worse.
Okay, appreciate that.
But the there was I think probably just an interview piece I was told about. I haven't gone to find it, but a friend of mine recently mentioned it was like an Ivy League college up in upstate, somewhere. Maybe it was in New York or something. And they went and interviewed the people and were asking them about, the gender questions, right?
Yeah.
Can a man have a baby?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they went to, the black neighborhood
Right.
in like Harlem or whatever.
Yeah.
And asked these people, can a man have a baby? And they're like, get out of here. What is wrong with you? You're dumb. This, of course not. You're stupid. Right. And it was just like the elites, those people that read the papers and the approved sources of media are the ones who are the most duped in our society right now.
Right.
It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
That they will jump through hoops to answer a question about how a man can have a baby.
Right. Yeah.
When they're asked that question.
Right.
By someone on the street.
So
it's just wild.
I would be. This might be a good segue back to making the kind of the point about how intentional this manipulation is. One of the earliest incidents for me to make me begin wondering if what it was being presented to me was the whole Dan Rather National Guard expose on George Bush. Do you remember that? Do you? You would have been.
I think yes. I think I remember hearing about it. Go ahead.
Well, I just pulled it up there. This is the Wikipedia, right? This is right. To talk about the.
Yes.
Yeah, Wikipedia. So this would have been. When did it actually happen? What year? 2004. Interesting. So it was a really wild, and it just to summarize what happened was Dan Rather produced documents that indicated, it was like by the commanding officer of George Bush's unit, that George Bush had found a way to dodge going to Vietnam as a combatant. The problem was that some internet sleuth saw the documents and looked at them very carefully and realized that, well, it was typed with a character set that didn't really exist, or maybe it existed but nobody used it.
I remember that.
Yeah, and he still defends this to this day. He still stands by this. We've never been told where he got the documents. He's never given up his source or anything like that. But it, to me, this put a really sour taste in my mind, because if not for the internet sleuths, this would have flown. This would be history right now. It would be accepted part of the narrative about George Bush, and we assume that he wouldn't have won the election. That he was a draft dodger, which for all we know, maybe he was, but it's not going to be shown by this evidence, right? And it raises, I think, the obvious question, which is, okay, so how much of all the other stuff that we have seen in the media for hundreds of years now, going back to, I don't know when we want to choose, 1898, why not? We're just fabrications, but there was no internet sleuths to dig into it and expose it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about this because this is go ahead. Can you not hear me?
Well, no, that's helpful. I was just thinking about, so for some, let me say, I don't like to interrupt your
I was done.
point, but I know the YouTube is coming across fine, but our VDO,
Yeah.
you're dropping on the VDO, and I don't know why.
All right, hold on.
Am I clear on your
Yeah,
end?
yeah. Am I only the audio? Is that the only thing that's causing a problem?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the imagery is degraded, but it looks
Okay.
good on YouTube.
How's that? Do you hear me better?
I don't know.
I just changed the microphone. Can you hear me
Maybe
better?
it still dropped a little bit there.
Okay, well, let's see here.
Yeah, I hear you better, but it still has a little bit of a machine tune to it.
Okay, my guests who are watching this, how are we sounding? I'm checking my setup over here, which tells me how many CPUs are dropped. So this would be a good time to share that on Thursday.
Sounds good, he said.
Okay. See, you're just making it up, Glenn. It's your computer. It's not mine.
Yeah, see, it's just yellow journalism.
Yeah. So
so you actually are fine now.
Okay.
So let's keep going.
On Thursday, I'm going to have my first podcast interview with somebody in the studio, and I have the setup all ready. Do you guys want a quick sneak peek?
Yes.
Here we go. There it is. I got the cameras all pre-positioned. We're good to go. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. I bought an extra camera so that I could zoom in on both individuals separately. And I was telling Glenn before we started that I have loaded a program to a laptop so that I can control the broadcast remotely, even so I can actually be sitting there talking with him and not be at my computer. So we're going to be talking about, you'll be find this interesting maybe, about how Jimmy Carter made it legal to brew beer. Did you know
that's right.
It was illegal before Jimmy Carter?
I heard that. Yes.
It's crazy.
I heard that.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And that guy, he was almost like Biden about it. He didn't even know he did it. But he did. It's kind of a noxious way of saying it. Yeah, there you go. Mine's all gone. Yeah. Anyway, so that's on Thursday. We will. I have a friend of mine who owns a winery, and he's going to come in. We're going to talk about winemaking, but we're going to lead off by talking about this great gift that Jimmy Carter has given us, the freedom to brew your own beer. Yes. And I'll do it live. It'll be crazy. So sounds like everything sounds like we're back. And it's interesting.
We are. We are.
I'm looking at my CPU. It was pretty high. So maybe I blame you falsely. It could still be me.
Yeah.
Let's get back.
You're good now.
Yeah.
So what were we saying? So what was the last thing you'd mentioned real quick? Because I did.
It was the oh yeah. It was the Killian documents here.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said without the internet sleuths, right?
Right.
This I'm sorry. This is not exactly tied to the internet sleuths, but just the power of the media to influence you.
Yeah. Right.
On what to care about. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a comical element. Okay.
Okay.
And so let me ask you this. Have you ever seen the Anchorman movies?
No.
That's fine. That's fine. I just had to ask, right, with Will Ferrell.
Okay.
The Anchorman movies, The Legends of Ron Burgundy.
I've seen some YouTube clips. They look pretty funny.
So it's the second one is priceless, like in terms of it just telling you and giving you insight into the development of the news.
Okay.
And so there is a scene. I have it here. I don't know if you can play it easily. Can you play it easily if I message it to you?
Unfortunately, no. I have not
You
been
have to
able
load it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. So just in brief, it's if you look on YouTube, you can look up Anchorman 2 car chase.
Okay.
Right. So there's a moment in the movie where they're like, we've got to go live for the evening, and Ron Burgundy's character, the main character, Ron Burgundy, he's trying to figure out how to make this news station successful, right? In the late evening kind of demographic, right? And so he finds out that there's a car chase going on, kind of like the O.J. Simpson thing.
Yeah.
But this is, according to the movie, this is in 1980 because
Okay.
there's a narrator in the film.
Okay.
And so in 1980, they say, the narrator says, the modern viewer might think this is just a common thing to watch a helicopter follow a car chase.
Yeah.
And he says, but in 1980, it had never been done before. And so Will Ferrell's character just says, put me on with the car chase live right now. Just listen to what I'm saying. Don't question me. And he goes and sits down. And this is the dawn. The second movie, I believe, is the dawn of the 24-hour news channels, which are a major player in what we've been dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Because especially the older demographic in our lives, that's all they have on.
That's
right.
Yep.
They're not watching movies. They're not reading books. They just have the 24-hour of their choice news channel of their choice on all evening, right? And so he goes and constantly is just commentating on this car chase, and he's making up wild things, like, I don't know, I'm not sure, there may be so and so in the car or something, just doing all kinds of stuff. And all of a sudden the ratings and everything just skyrocket, right? Everybody calls each other to go turn it on to the live GNN breaking news. There's a car chase and they're talking about it. And so that aspect of the 24-hour news channel and what Ron Burgundy's character does in Anchorman 2 encapsulates for me like that whole dynamic of the news telling you what to care about, and all of these people thinking they should care about it. And a great example was what you opened with the clip, right? Later on in that speech, you said the TED Talk, she talks about climate change. Is I remember that correctly?
That's right.
Yeah. So because the news media tells everyone to care about climate change,
right? And if
they could tell everybody to care about something else, and
they could tomorrow they could just decide to say that climate change isn't a thing, and almost every one of the persons that is for it today, like advocates it for it, however you say that, would instantly change their viewpoint. It might take them a little while. Like it might take 6 weeks, and they're like, "What? I feel like I've been unbound by some burden."
Yes.
I feel like I used to be angry about something. What was that?
What was I angry about?
I have some people that I know that I have conversations a little bit like this with, and one of the assessments that I make, or assertions might be a better way of saying, is like, if your views are absolutely identical to what is heard in the mainstream media, you're not your own.
No.
There must be a divergence somewhere. If you cannot find a divergence anywhere, you don't have a brain. You're just a tape recorder. You're recording and then spitting out what people give to you. And so that could be a test. Like if you're wondering, am I an NPC? Just ask yourself, do I have a single independent thought?
Yes. If for anybody watching who doesn't know what NPC is, it's non-player character.
Yeah.
That means you are controlled by the game,
So now, if you would have
by
said,
the game master.
yeah, if we would have said this 5 years ago or 6 years ago, that we could have been banned from X, like saying learn to code, right? We're calling someone an
Yes.
NPC is like dehumanizing them, right? Yeah, we've just
That's
committed
right. That's right.
genocide. You're a genocide advocate, Glenn.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this will be
Yeah,
a separate.
so bad because you can do whatever you want to NPCs in video games, right?
That's true. Yep,
I'm dehumanizing them all.
that's right.
No, just we're not dehumanizing any of you watching. We're just telling you to be real people.
We are trying to rehumanize them.
Rehumanize. Bring them back to life.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, yeah. So anything else you want to touch on?
Well, I do have another thing popped up here.
Okay.
That's a little bit related. I have it ready to go. Because we've already touched on this a number of times, the Durham report. So Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the drive-by media. And this I think is like one of the tactics. Like if you were to ask yourself, if you've gone through Glenn and Tony's checklist of am I an NPC or not, and your first item is, do I have any views that contradict the New York Times? The other part of it is like, so the other part of the tactic, it's all intentional, and Limbaugh described it really well with this phrase. Are you familiar with this phrase? Drive-by media?
I don't remember. I used to listen to him all the time. I just cannot recall.
So the drive-by media is like a drive-by shooter. The guy who drives, he puts the gun out the window. He shoots indiscriminately. He doesn't know who he hits. He may have had a target, but he probably hit like 5 other people too. And then he drives away, and he never comes back. He never answers for it. He never takes responsibility for it.
Yes.
So
that's helpful. That's helpful.
The drive-by media is another way. It's a tactic. It's one of the things they do, and that's why this. I think the Killian document here was like it was supposed to be in that vein. Rather came out. He's going to throw this grenade into the people outside the car, and then drive away after the damage is done. And he would have gotten away if it hadn't been for those meddling kids. But like the whole Trump thing too, this is the thing about, like I said, do you have a test? Like how are you going to find out if you're your own man, as it were? So almost everything that was part of the Russian narrative against Trump, almost every one of those things has been completely dismissed at this point. Like almost all of them have been refuted. And the Durham report went through, I read it actually, in case anyone's wondering, and it went through the major ones and said, this didn't happen, this didn't happen, this didn't happen. This was malicious. This was malevolent. If we had, at one point he says, and I'm paraphrasing, if we could throw someone in jail, we would. It would be this person, but we don't have that power. Just, like, and there are people still to this day. Who still have that. And that is the drive-by media at work.
That's right. Yeah, I remember, like, I've heard of other articles similar to that where they'll shoot first, and their headline, the main lead of their story is a complete fabrication or a complete misinterpretation of the events, and then the only thing that they'll maybe do is come back and add a note at the bottom,
right,
saying, this was actually inaccurately reported. Trump didn't make fun of a Down syndrome child. He laughed at her joke, right?
Something like
right?
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Just Trump didn't kill a puppy.
Yeah.
he actually saved it from dying.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it just pick up your footnote.
Yeah.
But the whole rest of the story is still there. It's still published.
Right.
No one ever pays for it. No one ever retracts it.
Right.
They don't delete it. And the subtle correction is never makes a difference.
Right.
And nobody comes back to look at it.
Right. Exactly. So we have not asked the question that's on the thumbnail. Can journalists be trusted? We've gone an hour and 15 minutes and have not.
We had to get we had to build up to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So let me offer a quick answer and then you can offer something. So I would say no, but only in the sense that you can't trust anyone.
Okay.
Like everything that comes to you, if you're going to be a real human person walking this globe, you should always be filtering and testing what you receive. And the media is just as prone to be filled with people with ulterior motives as anything else. So can they be trusted? Sometimes, but never, I would say, never like 100% implicitly. Like you must test them all the time. And they do have us at a disadvantage because a lot of these organizations, the service that they could provide to us if they were not slanted so much, is providing us the information that we as people do need to process what's going on around us. That's a very valuable service. I can't go to Baghdad and check out what's going on. I can't then turn around and fly out to Kiev and, see that. I can't go and ask Putin what his thoughts are. I can't do those things. So to have someone gather that information, synthesize it, and present it is a valuable service. But I have to be aware that they have an agenda.
That's right.
Or may have an agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I call it having a healthy skepticism. Right? Yeah. Skepticism is a good tool for anyone because of fallenness and deception in the world. So there's I guess my thought is that with that healthy skepticism, you have to realize that you might have to do some work.
Right.
You might have to do some reading.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Which is why you should read the books.
That's right.
From Good and Book Press.
Very, very well done.
Is that right?
Yeah.
There's a saying in some of my circles on X that people like to say regularly. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the retort, do the reading.
Yeah, right.
Have you seen that one? Do the reading.
Go read a book, dude. I love that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone said that to me about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and I said, all right, well, which book? Because maybe I already have it. And they literally never replied.
They never replied?
I'm like, I would read the book. Please tell me the book.
Tell me what to read.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So, that's a great advice. You do have to give some effort. And if you don't have the time to give the effort, then just maintain your skepticism.
Yeah.
Like just don't swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
As it goes, because that'll rip your. If you're a fisherman, you don't want this fish to swallow the whole thing. You'll never get it out, right?
That's right.
Cut the line, and they'll probably die. You'll probably die if you swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
That's right.
So don't turn yourself into an NPC, but actually be a thoughtful person.
So that reminds me of this quote that I have prepared by C.S. Lewis. Let's get rid of that. And he says he was writing at this kind of the same time as Jacques Ellul was actually, and he made the same observation, in the Screw Tape Letters, I think, actually, about how the sophisticated guy is the one easiest to be taken in. It's the worker who's not like, in the high air of whatever. That guy like sees through it. It's like, yeah, a man can't have a baby, idiot. Anyway,
Yes.
So this quote I think is really like, maybe I don't even want to talk about this with only 10 minutes left, but
Oh,
like Lewis actually was in favor of a monarchy, even as he was in favor of democracy. He like saw the value of certain virtues related to submitting to like other people in this sense. Like he, even if he believed in democracy, but he didn't believe in that everyone was actually equal, and he thought it was dangerous to act as if everybody was actually equal. Because now you're not taking into account people's actual gifts or their weaknesses or whatever. But what we have today is a situation with a lot of journalists and public service people who believe that they are smart enough to manage the lives of 6 billion people. They can't even find their car keys in the morning, just like the rest of us. Right? So this quote really resonates with me because it doesn't matter how smart you are, unless you're God, you can't do the thing that you say that you want to do. You can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to read it for everybody?
Oh, well, I figured they could read. It's on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I like to have it read.
Aristotle.
So, yeah.
You read
Go
it
ahead.
then. You read it.
Yeah. Aristotle said that some people were only fit to be slaves. I do not contradict him, but I reject slavery because I see no men fit to be masters.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, and that's one of the more interesting aspects, right, of being in favor of monarchy. Like I can summarize this quickly for us, since we've only got a little bit left. But with Yarvin, or Moldbug, as his pseudonym was, is in favor of monarchy, right, in transitioning away from democracy to monarchy, kind of an efficient, technocratic monarchy or something. But the point with Lewis being in favor of monarchy, and then some of our American tradition, is that everybody recognizes that most people are not fit to be good masters, right?
Yeah, right.
Because of our flawed and sinful selves. But since I'll just go ahead and say this briefly, Jesus is king, right?
Yep.
All nations are under a grand universal monarchy. But in our case, the American experiment said, hey, because no one's fit to be a master but God, right? We said, well, let's create a form of limited government that could give us some checks and balances against those people gaining too much power, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's still that reality that God is fit to be master and he's good. And so I just wanted to say that, there's reasonable arguments to be made on both sides for the best form of human government. But it's not a bad thing to maintain a healthy skepticism
Right.
of power, and maintain a healthy skepticism of the ruling elites and those who have this authority, especially if it's governmental, it's established by God. But because no one's perfect, it's good to have that healthy skepticism. So like I said, I wanted to be brief, but I hope that makes sense. So.
So there's a comment. The OJ Wolf Smasher says, I believe all journalism should be trusted, especially clickbait websites, of which he runs one. So
Yes.
yes,
Yes. The clickbait stuff gets everyone.
yeah.
I will constantly see clickbait and I will want to know. It's just that curiosity. And then as soon as you click on it and you find out that there's a million ads
Yeah,
and the lead is buried
yeah,
at the bottom of 20 ads,
right.
I just immediately close it and I'm like, there, you've gotten some ad money from me. I'm done. But at least I tried. I tried to figure out what is underneath the pyramids. Wait, I can't hear you. Did you mute me or I can't hear you anymore? Did your thing die? No. The question is, do I play Jeopardy music or do I just make jokes? That's the real question here, everybody. Does anybody want me to make a joke? I love that it's snowing in the background. Yes, you're there.
I got to unmute myself. Now, am I back?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Wow. So that was interesting. So my new microphone that I bought did not last more than an hour and a half.
Oh,
It's supposed to last
like the power on it didn't?
Yeah.
The charge?
It's supposed to last for 16 hours. All right, well, we'll have to investigate that. All right, so I was saying
Okay.
something very profound when I was silenced. So let me get back to it.
Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, I know why it went away. It's because I had to minimize this over here. Ridiculous. Well, this is why we keep playing, learning the tech, figuring it out. So
That's
to
right.
go back to your article, he ended with a pretty big emphasis on the media, which, but I think that it's worth talking about what the Fourth Republic, I have it up here, might be replaced by, even if it's just in a minute to like think about
Sure.
here. Because the republic that was formed by FDR and the New Deal, it's like the administrative state, right? It was one layer bureaucracy. It was the military industrial complex, on and on. And then it really, with LBJ's Great Society, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that was a whole new way compared to the rest of our history of governing ourselves, right? These nameless faces at USAID, the grant takers, the who produced curriculum for schools. You don't know who they are, but suddenly the kindergartners are learning about you can have two dads, and then you track down the money and you find out where it all came from. Blah blah blah. But if Trump defunds all of that, then that paradigm, that republic collapses, that falls down. So it makes me wonder. So which do we go back to? Do we go back to the one of the three that he mentioned, or will it be a new one that no one's imagined yet? What do you think?
I am leaning currently towards the second option.
Okay, you want
to that I will. I don't know if this is a good plug or not, but like you remember your Corn King?
Corn
Is your Corn
Siege.
King?
Yeah.
But wasn't it the Corn King in the book?
Right. Yes, you're right.
Yes.
Yep.
So the Corn King. You actually posited some changes.
I did. Yeah.
Didn't you?
Yep.
Some amendments and alterations. So I'm in favor of further development, is what I'll say. Further development based upon what we have seen as deficiencies in the system, right? Like whatever. I mean, I'm not thinking of anything specific right now. I'm just saying, like, in general, maybe there's. I mean, there could be some things that we go back to, right?
Yeah.
I definitely am in favor of reversing course on immigration stuff and no voter ID requirements and things like that, tightening up those ships, maybe changing some other stuff. But my point being is that I'm not hearing there's two voices, right? There's the voice that says we just need to return, but nobody's saying we need to return and can really specify what we need to return to. And so then there's others like Yarvin, like I think I sprung that on you earlier, right?
Yeah,
who's in favor of let me see if I have that over here. Basically a technologically driven, efficient monarchy. And he models it after modern day CEOs of companies because you can remove them. Does that make sense? So he's not wanting us to be trapped with a bad monarch, right?
Okay.
But he's wanting it to be removable, but through some form. I'm not saying I agree with him on this. Yeah. I'm just telling you what he thinks. So it's an interesting advocacy. And then there's a lot of people in Christian circles right now talking about Christian princes and whether or not we need a ruler like that has more concentrated power to do things. And if you get a good ruler in, right?
Yeah.
But it's only if you get a good ruler in. Like, see, that's that's me going, here's the caution.
Yeah.
Here's the caution. If you get a good ruler in, they can use that power well and actually affect good change. But I think Yarvin's strongest point for his argument here, and he might say this some in the article, in this article, is that every form of governance, even our own, is ultimately ruled by a centralized power, elites or otherwise.
Right.
So you cannot escape that, which this is interesting, right? Because you touched on this. You did. I'm pulling this out, right? I'm like giving you all these things, but I'm pulling these things out. You just said, right, about the whole, was it Lewis and the equality, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So one thing that Yarvin rejects is egalitarianism. Yeah. In favor of hierarchy. And Lewis was an Anglican. So he was in favor of hierarchy. He was obviously a Brit. So he was he was under a weakened monarchy. All those things. So there's a lot of stuff to go with that. I'm in favor of rejecting egalitarianism. I'm in favor of rejecting raw democracy, right? I'm in favor of fixing our problems. And if the current arrangement is not going to let us fix our problems, then we got to come up with something. And then I'm open to ideas. Yeah. That's all I'll say. I'm open to ideas.
Right. Yeah. I know. Oh.
There you go. See, you just got to cut it off there. So say, Glenn, it's over. We can come back. We can come back to this. I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen.
Well,
I'm going to be quiet now.
I want to be respectful for people's time. Of course, the thing is people can always just stop. But here's what I'll say though. So I would reject possibly the premise that there's always going to be a centralized group.
Okay.
Possibly. Would I? But we're obviously, for that to change, it's going to have to be some seriously proactive measures that would be society crunching, to be sure. So, for example, I would rather, what I would like to see, like if I were to give an idea, is I would take
Okay.
the 50 states and I would divide them up maybe by population and create like 250 states.
Okay.
And
See,
radically,
this is the ideas I want to hear.
yeah, and then radically scale back what the federal government can even do. Like it could do like three things, like maybe national defense, creating the official paperweight, things like that, and that, but everything else is done by the states. But the problem is, like right now, even the states are too big.
Yeah.
You can't even manage them. And the one of the other issues that happens is like the idea of the Christian Prince. Like, yeah, the problem is, could you get a good one? But the question is, could you get one at? Can you ever get one? Like, is it plausible? Could we ever get one? And the problem is that not enough. This is why society crunching is like we have this whole paradigm that we're being governed by people who are thousands of miles away, and it just makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that they're not going to be able to be responsive to, well, much of anything really, right? What does a guy in DC know about, you know the quality of my road outside?
Yeah.
Now obviously, as it stands right now, you know the federal government doesn't do much with that. But like, as I'll give you a better example, and then it's probably going to have to probably call it. You know what you did, Glenn? You walked
Yes.
into the room with two grenades like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You took out the pins on both of them
I went like this.
and you threw them. Yes.
Yes.
That's what you did at the end of my podcast. Ah, but
Oh,
it
I
is
love
my
it.
podcast, so I end it
That's right.
with
That's
saying
right.
this, that the new paradigm, if it's successful, if like, and I want it to be successful, I a very good example is disaster relief, right? So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that happens when the federal government does anything is that the people who then grow up under the paradigm of the government doing that think it's always been that way. No, FEMA has not always existed. It
No,
it
that's
didn't.
right.
Up until like the 1950s, even it was done by local communities. You had your local civil, support group, your civil air watch, and things like that. And then over time, people made the argument that, well, we'd be able to deal with our disasters better if we had more resources, and then it just kind of grew bigger and bigger and bigger until suddenly you have a case like North Carolina where the federal government just didn't care about them, right? Just like
Mm-hmm.
4 months ago, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, yeah, if ever there was time for a big giant federal response, there it was. So removing these things, the federal aspect of it, doesn't remove the need for disaster relief. What it does is it requires us to man up. If
Yeah.
we don't get to delegate everything off to others, we now have to govern ourselves. And that's what people don't want to do, in my opinion. So,
Yeah. That's right.
but in the end, it's better if we're I think, because on the scale of things, you could either have a less efficient, less capable local disaster relief who actually shows up, or you can have an omnipotent federal disaster relief that can do everything but doesn't do anything. Now translate that into every agency.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for
Love it.
that. I hope that was a good thought to tie it up with. We kind of with this. You know, in a way, this topic was too big. It was just
Yeah,
too big, even for an hour and a
that's
half.
right.
Yeah.
It is, and what you just touched on, I'm going to send it to you. Adverse possession is an old law. That would be a great aspect of discussion there,
Give me
because of
I forget.
adverse.
2 second
Yeah,
summary. What is that?
so adverse possession is, what was the other name of it? There was another one, but basically, where when you use or you use a piece of property long enough,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Like squatters' rights and
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
That's another term that's thrown around. It you gain access and rights to it.
Yeah. Under
Okay,
the common law.
and under common law, that's right.
Yep.
And so that's actually Yarvin's point of the 4 stages of the republic,
Okay.
is that each one is established by adverse possession.
Mm.
You allow it to go on that way for so long, it becomes the rights.
Yeah.
It's just like I said, that we should hold on. I'm not. You need to close this, but like I'm just saying, this would be a good extension of this conversation
That would.
to talk about letting all these rights, and I mean these powers to exist,
Mm-hmm.
even though they weren't originally authorized.
Yeah. Right.
But nobody put a stop to them.
Right.
So they adverse possession says,
Yeah. So
this is the way it is now.
So they're federal squatters, basically.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And you have to do something. You have to do something.
Sometimes you got to. Sometimes the squatters got to be shown the door. Yeah.
That's right. Love it.
Well, thank you for being on, Glenn. You can just sit there quietly while I wrap things up here. Again, on Thursday, my first live in studio um, presentation interview thing. I'm looking forward to it. I will definitely be looking into the microphone thing, but that is why I used it and why I kept the backup right here. So I'll have to solve how I'm going to do backup. Folks, as usual, go buy a book. There's 3 tantalizing ones. They're linked in the description. I want to put a give folks a mission that if you support this podcast and like what I'm trying to do, which I didn't really tell, I'm trying not to be a slave to the daily outrage. I'm trying to examine old things, and I'm trying to talk about things that are interesting and have depth and are not shallow. So if you like that, if you want to keep doing that, like, subscribe, share. Could you go out and find me within the week another viewer? That's my challenge to you. Find someone. Hey, try this guy out. He's trying to do something that no one else is doing. Yeah, there's 1,000 podcasts out there. Yeah, but this one's a little bit different. That go make that case. And if we do that for a while, who knows where we'll be. So my name is Anthony Horvath. Glenn Jones is with us tonight. On Thursday, the history of brew making and wine making. And with that, I'm going to use my fancy remote control here. Adios.